Again, welcome to this installment of Success with SmartStruxure. Based off of the interest that was shared during past calls, we are going to be talking about BBMDs during this call, and not only BBMDs, but I think the important background is going into some details of the network and kind of some networking basics. So you guys can understand when BBMDs are necessary. We're not going to be able to fit everything into today's call, so I'm planning on creating some follow-up videos that I'll post as quick help videos, specifically on walking you through the process of creating BBMDs and seeing what it looks like when it's set up correctly and seeing what it looks like when it's not set up correctly. But let's go ahead. So today during the call, as I mentioned, we're going to be discussing some networking background information. So we'll be talking about what our different types of messages are and some subnetting basics. So once we've laid that groundwork, we'll continue into BBMDs, or BACnet broadcast management devices, what they are, when we need them, talking about foreign devices and how that plays into it, planning your configuration, and then how you actually do it in SBO. And we'll just, again, have half of that demo more in follow-up videos. And then also, we mentioned this during the last session, but I'll reiterate now, we will not be having a session in 2 weeks, as is on our routine schedule, because our team has some events that we're needing to support that week. But we will be resuming on November 12th, so we'll look forward to catching you guys then. All right, so some background on networking. There are 3 types of messages, fundamentally, on all IP networks. So there are unicast messages. These are the most common. Most of our traffic is unicast. This is where it's one sender and one receiver. It's a one-to-one message. Unicast messages really are probably 90 to 98% of traffic that we see. BACnet uses unicast messages extensively. LAN can also use unicast. Modbus is just about all unicast. Multicast is where you have one device sending a message, but it's going to multiple recipients. We're not going to be talking about multicast as much, but just so you guys are aware, we often use multicast for streaming video, like in our Pelco product line. Also, LIPs can be configured to use multicast, where one LIP can send a message to multiple other LIPs, but not to every single device on the network, just to a group. Anyway, multicast exists, but we're not going to go too deep into that. Now, broadcast messages. They are not as common, but a broadcast is a message where one device on a network wants to send a message to every other device on the network. So BACnet makes use of broadcast messages specifically for device discovery, which is like the who is I am process. So that's when you find new BACnet devices, or when you're in the device discovery tab and you choose BACnet devices. It also uses this for route determination. So, for example, when you right-click, create a new BACnet object, and you select I want to upload from the device, and so you enter an instance number. So we don't know exactly how to get to that BACnet instance number, so we send a special message, it's a who is message, that's specifically targeted for that instance number. And so that's a broadcast message. The idea is we'll get a response back, and from that response, we'll be able to figure out how we can reach that device directly with unicast messages. And I've just gotten a message. Mike, are you not seeing slides? And you might need to unmute to let me know. Are you seeing the networking background slide?
I'm only seeing a black screen. Is everybody else seeing a black screen only?
Okay. Thank you, Will. Sounds like Will's able to see the slide.
Okay, I'll try to log back in.
Okay, cool. All right. I have gotten a couple messages that say I've had a connection issue. So, thank you, Rob. Appreciate the feedback. So there might be some issues. I am over wireless. If it seems like I move on to something and the screen doesn't match what I'm talking about, do feel free to ping me in the chat window so I can make sure to fix the problem. All right. So broadcast messages make up a fraction of the traffic, but they're very important when we do use them. Because otherwise we won't be able to discover devices, we won't be able to figure out how to reach other devices. And that's just within BACnet. There are other applications for broadcast messages. But specifically, we're going to be talking about just BACnet broadcast messages for this talk. So, IP address configuration. So most of you are familiar with an IP address and a subnet mask and a default gateway. So some of you guys are familiar with what each of those things are, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'll cover that stuff. First of all, the IP address, I'm talking about an IPv4 address, which is like a number dot a number dot a number dot a number. That address consists of both network bits and host bits. And there's also subnet bits, but we're just going to generalize things to keep it simple, and we'll just call it network and host. So a subnet mask, that second vital piece of IP address information that we know about a device or we receive from a customer, that is the key that we have to decode what portion of our IP address is the network bits and what portion is the host bits. And there are only a limited number of possible values for the subnet mask. In fact, there's like 30 or 31 possible subnet masks. So there aren't infinite possibilities there by any stretch. The default gateway is the IP address of the access point for you to reach other networks. So you might have other routes set up in a device. It's kind of advanced networking stuff. Typically, you don't. But if you need to reach another device that's not on your network, the default gateway is how you get there. So these are kind of the three components that typically you need. You know, there's other stuff like DNS or whatever, but these are the three things you need to set up IP communication for a device. So, for example, let's look at a sample IP address. This is an IPv4 address. So 192.168.1.2 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. So I'm going to show you guys some binary. There's the binary for the IP address. Let me advance a few more here. So there's the binary for the subnet mask. Based off this binary for the subnet mask, when the ones stop, that's where our network bits end. So we know that the first three numbers within our IP address are all part of the network number, and the last is our host address. So our network is 192.168.1, and our host is 2 in this example. So the lowest possible address, or the lowest address in this range is 192.168.1.0. So the lowest numerical number is actually our network address, so it can't be used by a host. So the first available host address is 192.168.1.1. Similarly, you can't use the highest address value for a host address because it's set aside for the broadcast address. So that'd be 192.168.1.255. So if this is the IP address of your device and it asks you for the broadcast address, like our automation server does, if you go into the properties of the IP network beneath your BACnet interface, this is the value of that broadcast address based off of our address and our subnet mask. Let's look at another example. So if our IPv4 address is 10.0.1.6 and our subnet mask is 255.255.0.0, again, I'll advance to get this last guy here. Our subnet mask only takes us through the second octet. So in this case, these first two values are our network number, and these second two values are our host address. So here, our network range is 10.0.0.0 to 10.0.255.255. So any other address in between those two values is in our same network. And to back up a little bit, if two devices are in the same subnet, that means we don't have to worry about BBMDs. So if your customer gives you a large network range, but they're all the device addresses they give you are in the same network range, you don't have to worry about BBMDs. So like this might be you've got 10 lighting panels and one automation server, and that automation server is going to bring in all these BACnet IP lighting panels. As long as all the lighting panels are in the same subnet, you don't have to worry about BBMDs. All right, so let's make things a little messier. Oh, and one note I wanted to share with you guys. In this example, our IP address is 10.0.1.6. Because of our subnet mask, 10.0.1.255 is not a broadcast address. That's a standard host address. So just because an IP address ends in .255 doesn't mean it is your broadcast address. So this is the slide that I was really wanting to title, When Life's Not All Unicorns and Rainbows. So when subnet masks aren't all 255s and zeros, sometimes things are a little bit messier. So in this case, we've got a subnet mask that's 255.255.252.0 and the IP address of 10.0.1.6. So in this case, our IP address, that third octet is split. Part of it is network address, and part of it is host address. So this is a little tricky. We know that the network address is 10.0.0, and then the host address is 1.6 within that. So our address range is 10.0.0.0 to 10.0.3.255. So there's a range of just over 1,000. I'm sorry, that should be 1,022 host addresses. But there's just over 1,000 host addresses in this network, and it's all in one subnet. So just in case some of you are not as comfortable with this slide, that's okay. Most people are not. There are tools that can do all this calculating for you, so you don't have to look at binary ever again for this. Even for those people that are comfortable with binary, it's faster for me just to go to this website than to bust out a sheet of paper, unless it's one of the ones that I'm comfortable with mentally. So, for example, just with a Google search, I found subnet-calculator.com. You enter your network class. When in doubt, you can just click A, and then you type in the IP address that you care about. And then you can, from a drop-down list, select from one of those like 30 subnet masks. And then it'll give you these 3 pieces of data. So it'll give you the address range for this subnet. So you can see, this is, I entered the values from my last example. So you can see that this is the host address range, which excludes the lowest possible address, which is the name of the network or the name of the subnet, and it excludes the highest possible address, which is the broadcast address. So, great tool. There are other ones out there too. If you've already got one you like, then feel free to keep using that. But this is a great way for you to say, hey, I've got 2 IP addresses. I know the subnet mask for at least one of them. Based off that IP address and that subnet mask, is another address in that same network or not? The reason we care is because if they're not in the same subnet, you have to do BBMDs if you need backnet traffic, specifically device discovery and route determination, to go from one device to the other. And even if you've already discovered a device, you'll still need to be able to use broadcast messages because periodically SmartStruxure sends a who is message to that device. And when it uses broadcast, if it's unable to reach the device, it might think it's fallen offline. So we're going to play a little game called Are You in My Subnet? I'm guessing you guys don't have the subnet calculator up. Some of you may not need a subnet calculator to answer this. Feel free to unmute your phones. I'd love to get someone to answer each of these. You can unmute with a *6, or if you want to, you could use the chat. So if our device is 192.168.1.2, the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. If our remote device is 192.168.1.243, is that in the same subnet?
Yes.
Yes, you're correct. So our network range, yes, thank you, John Griffin, based off of our, nice, Rob, based off our network range, that's 192.168.1.0 to 192.168.1.255, that remote device is in this range. We do expect to receive each other's broadcast traffic, so a BBMD wouldn't be necessary if we're just talking between our address and this other address. So for the next exercise, are you in my subnet? Our device is 10.54.32.199. Will's already got it right. Our remote device is 10.54.232.5, and we're working with a subnet mask of 255.255.0.0. So Will had it right. Anyone else going to shoot for it, or has everyone just looked up what Will's answer was? All right. Well, I'll go ahead and nice. Yes, John, you've got it too. I'll award the points to Will and John and explain. Nice, Rob. Based off of this subnet mask, only the first 2 octets need to be the same. So the full range of 10.54.0.0 to 10.54.255.255 is all one gigantic subnet. So even though we're in .32 and the remote device is in .232, they're still in the same gigantic subnet. So we would see broadcast traffic back and forth. All right, last exercise. So a similar address, 10.54.32.199. This is our subnet mask. And then the remote device is 10.54.32.120. Do you guys think this is in the same subnet? Will we be able to share broadcast messages directly? All right, so I'm not going to make anyone bust out the subnet calculator. But this is one of those nasty cases where the subnet mask isn't all rainbows and unicorns. So we've got a non-0 or 255, which means, oh, Will, you got it right, which means that some bits are the network bit and some bits are the host bits. So in this case, with 128, only one bit is cheated over to the network side, and the rest are all on the host side. So what's that do? That means that we don't have a full range of 255 over here. We have half of that. So essentially, our subnet only contains 127 or 128 numerical values, which is 126 host addresses. So our subnet range is 10.54.32.128 through 10.54.32.255. So because this other device is below that range, it is not on our subnet, and we would have to use a BBMD. So this is not intended to be an exercise to trip people up, maybe more just to show that the subnet calculator is pretty valuable to figure out whether something is or is not in your subnet. The whole reason we do that is to figure out if we need help with our broadcast messages. So enter the BACnet broadcast management device. Its purpose in life is for relaying BACnet broadcast messages between subnets. So it sits and listens for broadcast messages. When it hears one that is a broadcast, it sends copies of that message via unicast to all other known BBMDs. So why is that important? Most modern routers will block broadcast messages and prevent them from going from one subnet to another. Unicast messages, on the other hand, unless there's a rule that prevents them, unicast messages can typically flow freely from one address to another, regardless of which subnets they're on. So this unicast message is what allows the traffic to go from one subnet to another. And then the BBMD on the other side replays the broadcast message as a broadcast message so that devices over there can hear it. So the analogy I like to use to explain this is like speakerphones on a conference call. So let's say that right now, let's say I was using a speakerphone, and let's say that Rob Chrysler is using a speakerphone, and someone else is sitting in his office, and someone else is sitting in my office. Anyone who talks inside my office, as long as they're talking in a normal voice, that'll get picked up by the speakerphone. It'll get sent via the phone system to the other speakerphone, and then it will replay that message, that sound. And then when someone over in Rob's office responds, his speakerphone will take that sound, send it over to my phone, and my phone will replay it. So that is how we get around people in my office not being able to hear people in Rob's office directly via broadcast message. So you don't always want to use speakerphone. In fact, if you're sitting by yourself in a room, it might make more sense just to use a headset or to hold the phone up to your face. So that is what we call a foreign device. So foreign devices are used when we typically just have one or a very limited number of BACnet IP devices on a subnet. This just allows them to latch on to a BBMD. So it registers as a foreign device against one BBMD, and that BBMD is responsible for sending all broadcast messages that go through the conference call, if you will, to that one caller. So another significant detail is that foreign device relationship will only send from the foreign device to the BBMD broadcast traffic that initiated from the foreign device. So if the foreign device sent all of the traffic that it could hear locally, all the broadcast traffic that it could hear locally to the BBMD, then it would actually just be a BBMD. It will ignore all the local broadcast traffic as far as sending to the BBMD goes. It can still act on its local traffic, but it won't relay it. So let's look at a simple diagram. So here we've got 3 networks. And in fact, maybe there could have been some value in me drawing a 4th one too. But we've got 3 devices on network 1, 3 devices on network 2, and 1 device on network 3. For this example, we're saying that we want to pass BACnet IP data across these devices. So you might not actually be doing that with a large set of automation servers, because you might not be bringing BACnet IP data from the other ASs into one AS's BACnet interface. But these could just as easily be lighting panels or meters or rooftop unit interface cards or whatever. So if you've got 3 devices on one network, they will be able to hear each other's BACnet broadcast traffic just naturally. Similarly, on network 2, those devices will all be able to hear each other's broadcast traffic. The problem is, if you want to do a device discovery from network 1 against a device on network 2, naturally, you won't be able to see one of these other devices unless you've configured BBMDs. So in this case, we've set up device 2 and device 5 to function as BBMDs. So these are like the speakerphones. Not only are they just a full-blown controller, but they also function as a speakerphone. So any broadcast messages, any BACnet broadcast messages on network 1 will be heard by AS2, and it will send those messages over to AS5 for AS5 to replay them. And then any responses from a device on network 2 will be heard by AS5, sent back over to AS2 to be replayed. So the broadcast messages will be propagated across all networks that have a BBMD on them. I've also got network number 3 here that's got a foreign device. This foreign device is the only BACnet IP device on that network, so we don't need to rebroadcast messages or listen for other devices' broadcast messages and pack them up and send them to the other BBMDs. So in this case, it just latches on to AS number 5. So whenever AS number 5 receives a broadcast message, either locally or from the other BBMD, it's going to locally reproduce that broadcast message if it did come from network 1. And then it's also going to send a copy directly to AS number 7. So in this way, it's responsible not only for sending messages to its local network, but also to that associated foreign device. One caveat here that I've not illustrated but we'll talk about. If we had multiple BBMDs on one network, it can cause huge problems. So imagine if AS6 was also a BBMD linked up to AS5. Whenever there's a broadcast message on network 2, if AS6 was also a BBMD, it would receive it, send it as unicast over to AS5, and AS5 would recreate that broadcast message for the entire network 2. AS6 would then hear that message, package it up as unicast, and send it back to AS5. AS5 would then replay it. Again, AS6 would hear it, package it, send it. AS5 would replay it. This creates a broadcast storm. So when Mike and I conduct the BACnet Advanced Troubleshooting class, we typically set this up as one of the samples of what not to do. And just because sometimes we're a little sick, we like to set it up and leave it running the whole lunch break during one of the days. And so this last time we did it, I think after our hour and 10-minute lunch, it had resulted in 1.7 million broadcast messages on that network. So it creates a huge amount of broadcast traffic. Again, broadcast traffic, it's every device on that subnet. And in fact, if you had it linked up to other subnets, they would also be receiving all that broadcast traffic. So every controller, every computer, every IP-connected device on that network gets hit with all that traffic. So this is a very quick way to get on your customer's IT department's radar. And for most IT departments that are moderately savvy, it's a good way to get your ports killed because they will want to stop the bleeding and then figure things out after the fact. So just got a question. Someone asked, how does AS7 know to broadcast to AS5, or why does AS5 see AS7? That's a great question, and that's specifically because of the foreign device relationship. So when you set up foreign device, the way you do it is by going into AS7, telling it that it's a foreign device, and its parent BBMD is the IP address of AS5. So when you enter that, AS7 connects to AS5 with backnet messages, and it tells AS5, hey, I'm your child now. So then AS5 is aware that AS7 is its foreign device, and so it knows to send a copy of all broadcast messages it sees or receives to AS7. Similarly, because AS7 knows that AS5 is its parent, anytime it generates a broadcast message, it not only generates it locally, but it also sends a copy to its parent. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, so that's my last little pictogram here. And let me just briefly show you guys what it looks like inside SBO. So here I've got an automation server. This is running 1.5. Here's my backnet interface. Beneath that, you've got an IP network. In order to set up a BBMD, you just right-click on IP network and create a new BBMD. And so it's got that icon that looks like a suspension bridge. You can keep the default name. That'll help eliminate confusion. And then beneath that, you've got device table entries. And let me select that. That's nice. So BDTE is it's a BBMD device table entry. I think that's yeah. So this is not nicely named. It's just a very basic BDTE 00001. If you want to create another one, you can right-click and just say New BDT Entry. So you can name this whatever you want and click Create. And then you select on it, select it, and then this is where you can specify the IP address of that BBMD. So once you have your list of BBMDs, you can just right-click. So let's say that this is 1.2.3.4, for example. I save that. So now I've got a list of BBMDs here. Let's say there really was another automation server with IP address 1.2.3.4, and it had been configured as a BBMD also. I could right-click here and click Teach. And so that goes out and that tells all the other devices in our list about all the devices in our list. So in this case, it would just go out to that one other BBMD and tell it, here's the list of BBMDs. Because our first entry here, sorry I didn't show you this, is the same IP address as my automation server. So entry number 1 typically is our own address. So then any additional entries are the other addresses. You can also right-click here and select Learn BDT Table. Now in the BACnet class, I was surprised we had some unsuccessful learns. So I haven't dug down and looked at the Wireshark yet, but just as a heads up, in the current 1.5 release, Learn might not work as expected, but typically, the way it has worked in 1.4 and before, is you can just type in the IP address of another BBMD that is configured with a full device table list. And then you can use, this is the default port number. If you're using a different port number, then you could change it there. And then you click on OK. It requests the list of all the known devices from that other BBMD. So the standard process is probably you bring up a new device on a new subnet that doesn't have BBMDs, but you want to connect it to other subnets that do have an existing BBMD infrastructure. You typically do that by starting with a learn. First of all, you create your BBMD, which has your first entry in it. And then you learn, you type in the IP address of another BBMD. That will populate this list with all of those BBMDs plus our own address. And so then you do a right-click teach. So you've added yourself onto the list, and then you resend that list with yourself on it out to everybody so that everybody else then in turn learns about you. That's the process for setting up BBMD. I do caution you, again, make sure that you do not set up two BBMDs in the same subnet, because if you do, it will cause a broadcast storm and we'll get in a bunch of trouble. The exercise that we walked through here earlier in the call, this is exactly how you'd figure out, is this other device, so if this is my address and my subnet mask, and here's the other device's address, are we on the same subnet? And for every BBMD, for every other BBMD, you want to make sure the answer is no, we're not on the same subnet. So the easiest way to do that might be to use something like this calculator that I showed you. So based on our new controller's IP address and subnet mask that either we have selected or the customer has given us to use, we can look at this address range and then just look at our list of BBMDs and make sure none of them fall within this range. All right, and again, I'm planning on creating a video of BBMDs gone wrong, and that's probably something I'll upload and disguise it as a quick help video. It'll actually be more of a Nature's Great Disasters video. It's maybe more for like a Discovery Channel. But anyway, be looking for that on the quick help video. So that is everything I was planning on covering. I will now absolutely open up the call so that anyone who's interested in asking questions, either about this or something else, feel free to speak up or use the chat window. All right, Will has asked, can an AS be a foreign device? The answer is yes. I'm a little bit rusty. Let me see if I can remember where to set this up. Is it under IP network? Properties. Yes, here it is. So under your BACnet interface, by default, an IP network is created. If you want this automation server to be a foreign device of another BBMD, it's here at the very bottom of the Basic Properties tab. There's Foreign Device Settings. This is where you'd enter the IP address of the BBMD that you want to associate with. Once you type it in here and you click Save, that'll send out that message to that BBMD to attempt to register as a child foreign device. So good question, Will. I'm glad that you asked it, because I needed to refresh myself on that too. All right, other questions. Feel free to type them into the Join Me chat or hit *6 to unmute. Someone has asked, using your example, where did you tell AS5 to look for AS7? Great question. You don't have to, because the process of typing in the BBMD's IP address here, and in this case, it would not be appropriate to use foreign device because we've already set up that we are a BBMD. But if this was gone, and in fact, I'll just delete it. So if we are not a BBMD, and this is how you turn off BBMD, we click IP network, properties, basic, and enter the IP address of another BBMD here. When we click save, it's going to try to go out and tell that other device that we are wanting to be its child. Let's try this. I'm really curious to see if this works when you type in an address that it can't register with. Oh, wow, it let me type it in. Didn't give me an error. But the standard process of what's going on under the hood is that it's attempting to create a child relationship with that BBMD. The other thing you can do, though, if you are concerned that you might not have registered as a child, you can log into that other device, and then you can look at its foreign device list. Oh, great. Renew. Perfect. Reliability. We are not reliable right now. Online is false. That's great. So things actually did crash and burn because I typed in a bad BBMD IP address. So you can see we are not online because we weren't able to register foreign device. That's nice. It does give us feedback. Even though it doesn't give us red here, it would give us red if it was an invalid IP address. But even though it's a valid IP address, it's telling us it was not able to renew foreign device registration. So it does tell us that it wasn't able to let AS5 know that it's its child. It's a great question. All right, so when the foreign device registers as a child, the BBMD AS5 logs AS7 as a device it needs to broadcast to. Yes, exactly, except that it actually uses unicast messages. But yes, as soon as you set up foreign device in AS7, that tells AS5, send me all the broadcast traffic as unicast messages. But yeah, you're exactly right. When you set up the foreign device, that is what is responsible for configuring the BBMD that you are associating to, telling it that you want a copy of all the broadcast messages as unicast. You're exactly right. All right. So, other questions on BBMDs, networks, or otherwise? All right. If there are no other questions, thank you, guys. Oh, yes, John Griffin. Thank you for asking. Can you post latest recordings? You are exactly right. As soon as we hang up, I'm going to be 3 behind. So I have, I'm not sure if I've posted Julio's yet. I may have or I may not have, but I know I owe you at least last ones, the last one, and of course today's. So yes, I am behind on recordings. If we wrap things up now, I think I'll probably have time this one will probably become available in about an hour, so I'll probably have time to upload it. And while I'm waiting, I can be uploading the session from 2 weeks ago. Yeah, good question, John. I'll be posting this recording and the others up on the community. So if you have any questions, feel free to go back and refer to it. And if you still have questions, then feel free to ask them on a subsequent call. Although, as a reminder, I'm just going to go back to the screen real quick just to make sure it's on everyone's radar. Future sessions, no session in 2 weeks. And we may send out an email just because people that aren't on this week's call might not receive word, and they might be connected and waiting for 15 minutes. But we will be resuming November 12th. So thank you all for joining us. I'm glad you guys are participating, glad you're asking good questions. Hopefully this is helping eliminate some of the pain points and some of the challenges. BBMDs have absolutely been a struggle for multiple branches that I've talked to and even some partners I've talked to. So hopefully this is covering the information you guys need to be successful. All right, thanks very much, guys and maybe gals, and we'll catch you in 4 weeks.